What is up, team? It's Team Lead again. Today I bring you a very simple thing I found actually in one of the projects I had the pleasure of being involved with, and I thought we'll do something different today. We'll do a very simple refactor of certain code, and we'll talk about why the refactor makes more sense than the code which has been shown here. This is just a copy paste from the actual thing, but as you can see, there's quite a few things here. So let's talk about that. What it is here? So in C# we usually have the controllers, and controller is responsible of receiving communication from you, and depending on the method it does something. So for example, as you can see here, HTTP GET, this HTTP method asks for data to be returned. We have certain authors tags, so this is a very special thing in .NET. We can use those to use built-in authorization mechanism. If we don't want that, we can just remove that and have our custom logic, but for this case it makes sense. And IAction result is just the interface of returning stuff. It can be pretty much almost anything inputted here. Now, how I would refactor this code, and maybe I can give you a hint. Can you see right off the bat what could be the problem with such code? 1, 2, 3, go! No, you're wrong. First and foremost, the thing which is broken here is a level of abstraction. As you can see, there is a lot of business logic mapping and doing other stuff in here, but theoretically the controller should return only the data it needs to return, and if you need to get some kind of claim ID, you can do that, but nothing more, nothing less. And this is what's called a business logic, so you should definitely go into business layer. So how we would do it? We could do it like if we make a controller. So controller has a get function, which you can see in your screen. After that, it could be service. For example, let's see what it does. It returns the employee view. So you could use employee interface, right? So for example, it could be employee service, which returns this data, and that employee service calls IEMP database service, and that service gets actual data from DB. So this is how I would build it. So I would place at least a few levels of abstraction. And why would I do so? First of all, the best data is raw data, and that's in database, right? The other part, I would want to have control of how to do stuff with the databases, with my entities, and if something gets broken, I want that to be handled there. And our service for employees should handle our business logic, so mapping fields, changing fields, etc., etc., etc. And to get here, we get the result, only the thing we need. Now, let's look at the function itself. Maybe we can spot how we can improve it right away. So first and foremost, I don't like these two lines, just because there are two things here. So first, as you can see, we try to get value outright, and if this won't be available, it can, broke. So I wouldn't try to do it. There are special operators like null coalescent operator in .NET, where you can only take the value if that exists. And the other thing I don't like, it's not in this function. I checked the underlying code or code connected to this, and I found like in 30 or 40 more places it's being done the same way. So how we can improve this? We can definitely make a function just to do this. Here is the function, how I would do it. Very simple function, static one, so it can be reused. And this way we first get the same thing, but we check if that's not null, and only then we convert that value to something we need. Because right here the value would be string, and we would want to have integer because according to our logic it's an integer. And if by some chance it's not found or something is wrong, we just return -1 so we can check on that. So this is one of the first things I would use it. So in here it would be not all this. I would just call that function, right? So by passing HTTP context, and this way we have way better control. So the same thing we would do with our second line, we'll not do it here, or we can just, you know, for the sake of clarity, get client ID, and this would be get user ID. So this way it looks better, and it's, you know, way more concise, at least in my mind. And I really dislike strongly typing things where not necessary. So if you're getting employees, it's definitely an entity of type employee, you will get a list here. So you don't need to specifically say, I'm big guy to favor vars because it makes code more readable. And there are only specific scenarios where var can let you down, and there's like really edge cases. So if you have like a function, if you don't know what that function returns, in that specific sense, you know, it's not that helpful. For example, if we look here, var view data map view, so we don't know what kind of thing it returns, and some people can argue that in code review this way it's a little bit harder to see and understand. But again, I would argue you would definitely either way need to see that function to be sure what it returns. So you still have to open the code or open the specific function in other document either way. So, you know, var doesn't change here. What it gives though, it gives at least in my mind, the code looks more readable. So again, for example, list employee with data, blah, 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 and you know, this, and now you just say like var, and it's already shorter. So this is more concise, right? What else can we do? So this return is absolutely clunky, and as you can see, it makes new object, adds some kind of hidden fields. I wouldn't go that way. I would go in a way that it returns only something is needed, and if you need to filter that, I would say, you know, something like var filter view data, and then call filter function, like here, call view data here. I would implement that, and I only would do it like so. It's more readable, more concise, less creating new objects, and you know, etc. And we definitely have logic we can understand way better. Now, what else can, you know, put a knife to our eye? So for me, it's try catch. I'm not a fan of try catch. First and foremost, you should only use those on a code you cannot control. So for example, as I showed you before, if we were to build our actual database layer, actual database services, in there that would make sense a lot. Out here it doesn't. It just feels like it can break, and we don't know why. And also, as you can see, exception, I don't think that's good exception handling also. And the reason here probably is because there can be an inner and outer. So in order to battle this, if you have catching on any different level where you need it, you will need to see the inner. The normal exception level would work for you, because here it can go many layers deeper. That's why a person is trying to see maybe there's inner, maybe there's outer, and we're missing here. Usually you should just record ex.message like this part, and it would work like so. So how we should do it here? Just string here doesn't make much sense, A, and B, return that, you know, to front end. It's not a good idea. So at least we should enter here some user-friendly message. So for example, things went bad, error code, and we add some kind of logic here to show the code for this function. So best would be either have a specific way to have a message from your error logging software, or if you don't, just have an integer here to add into your enums where you can show that specific enum means specific error. So for example, just for this example, we can make it as 1, like make it like so, and this way we'll know that in our enum that number 1 there's type of error which happens only in controllers, so it will be helpful to the backend. How I would do this, I would probably use something like sentry. So let's say sentry SDK make message. I can't remember the exact function from the top of my head, but you know, the idea here is to use the provider to log messages. So I like sentry. It's personal preference. You can use your, it doesn't really matter. You can find your open source one or whatever, but you should log it somewhere where it can be found. And just to display a message to the user, he cannot understand it, he can refresh it, and basically message is lost, and we want to catch that. So how can we remake this one? Obviously, this should be something like return employee service get, what was that? Employee service, I can't remember the name, so just get view, something like that, right? And we can build our actual service. So public class I employee service I tech, we'll add that later. And this one will have get view like so, and in here we can paste this. So it's not great yet, and obviously it's going to be, it requires actual checking of errors and making that more beautiful. So it's probably like this. Obviously this is going to be a normal function name, and again here is a trying. So how I would do it, I would remove the try part here. I would leave here the business logic where we filter data, and the actual DB stuff would be moved into database layer. So we would need to have, let's say, public I database service. So let's input that there, something like so. We'll improve that later and make that more concise. This two goes back to our get place, so we need to use those. You then would pass those users here, user ID here, client ID probably also here. We make our naming, which makes sense. Obviously our get view will need int user ID, int client ID, right? Then we have few lines we can use, and voila, we have what's going to be list employee probably. So list employee view, something like that. And here this is starting to look pretty great. So obviously this is not correct syntax. It's going to be needing something like public get employees, get EMPs by client, tick, something like that. Chicky pooky, another curly brace, and obviously return the last one, like so, and the B employees. So it's going to be probably a list of employees, chunky pooky, and now here chicky, and now this one here uses our database service. I'll make the naming so, and like this, chunky pooky, boom boom, blocked. And if it needs user ID, it probably does. We just put it here, and probably needs a client ID. We input that client ID here, and the same goes for our part here. And yeah, now on the database layer, we know that things can go wrong. So here it does make sense to do try catch. And we try to make this work, and if that doesn't, we say catch exception e, and this way here we log. So as we showed Sentry SDK, I'm not sure what's the message, let's call it log, let's call it e message like so, and yep, more or less. I probably did mock up a few things here, because this probably should be like so, an actual implementing class which has a interface. And yeah, the whole point was to make things more readable and more understandable to someone who comes and works with your code. And you have to think in a way that there's a few things in objective-oriented programming, but I think that also works in functional to some degree as well. So one of the 4 pillars is abstraction. So you always have to think how to abstract different logic to different layers. And even if the code is somewhat small, like it was here, you can still have it biting you in the ass later on when you'll be adding a different business logic, or you just want to reuse things. So for example, that controller had that logic where you can get employees by client ID. Now we have a service, we can reuse that code. So 2 things happen here. A, we have a good looking, as it can look good in Notepad. So we have a good looking controller. I think you can totally agree that in this case, this looks way better, way more concise. How? Simply just to recap, we now have function to work with this, we have function to work with that. So that's reusability. Probably client ID and user ID are going to be used a lot over different controllers. Now we have a function which will not break, and we have reusable code. Code is looking good, is concise. It returns employee things out of the box here. And to make it more helpful, we could change this, but this is a topic for another time. I will not introduce a little bit hard to understand DTO patterns or topic like that here and now. But for this specific thing, I think it looks absolutely beautiful. So, you know, that's how I would keep it. We made our abstraction great. So we have our business logic here. We can make different things here with different checks. We can call different services to actually filter our data here. And again, it's going to be reused. It can be changed. It can be mapped. You can use some kind of functions, for example, from automapper to map one object to another. It's mainly done with to map, for example, database entities to business logic entities. Or if you receive some sort of data from a client which doesn't make sense for you. For example, you receive money in not in the doubles, but for example integers. So instead of $3, you get 300. So you have to make from that, basically a double, which would be 3, or 3.00. because that makes sense for you. So this would be the business layer where it takes care of that. You use your database service, and on the database, yes, it can break, and implementation can go wrong here. That's why you use try-catch here at the database level or a third-party software level. That's totally understandable and acceptable. Also, since it's only one layer here, you don't need to catch different type of exceptions. Simple message will work here. Log that into your tool of choice or into local text file if that works for you. Return the list which you need. And as I said before, do business logic, return the business logic you need, and have the controller return that. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching this simple refactor video of live an actual thing I found in one of the code bases. And I do hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and come back for more. Cheers.